Please, I know I'm just another inmate to you, but I found something in Rodriguez's case. Real evidence. He doesn't belong here." 31-year-old Gideon Mercer stood before the prison law library coordinator, his hands trembling as he held a folder thick with carefully annotated documents. For 8 years, he'd been serving a 25-year sentence for a crime he insisted he didn't commit. But instead of drowning in bitterness, he taught himself law, spending every free hour helping fellow inmates find hope in their appeals. The coordinator, Miss Hartley, studied him with weary eyes. She'd seen countless jailhouse lawyers over her career, most chasing false hope. But Gideon was different, methodical, brilliant, genuinely invested in justice rather than just his own freedom. "Show me what you found," she said quietly. Gideon's research had uncovered prosecutorial misconduct in Rodriguez's conviction, suppressed evidence that proved another man committed the crime. Within 6 months, Rodriguez walked free, embracing his elderly mother on courthouse steps, while Gideon watched the news from his cell, tears streaming down his face. It was his 5th successful exoneration, 5 men freed because a prisoner refused to let injustice stand, even while suffering his own. What Gideon didn't know was that his relentless legal work had attracted attention from an organization that investigated wrongful convictions, and what he was about to discover would shatter everything he thought he knew about his own case. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. "The Innocence Alliance has reviewed your case file. We'd like to speak to you immediately regarding significant irregularities we've discovered." Gideon's cellmate, an older man named August, noticed his hands shaking. "You okay, brother?" "They want to review my case," Gideon whispered. "After 8 years of everyone telling me to accept my guilt, someone finally wants to look." "Because you earned it," August replied firmly. "You freed 5 men. Karma's got a way of coming around." But when the Innocence Alliance lawyers arrived, what they revealed was more devastating than Gideon could have imagined. The lead attorney, a woman named Vera Strand, pulled out documents with visible anger in her eyes. "Mr. Mercer, your entire case file was fabricated. The witness testimony, coached by a detective who's now under federal investigation. The forensic evidence, planted. Your public defender, he was overwhelmed with cases and never investigated your alibi. You spent 8 years imprisoned for a crime that never happened the way the prosecution claimed." The words didn't make sense. Gideon had always maintained his innocence, but he'd believed the system had simply made a mistake, not that it had been deliberately corrupted. How did you discover this?" he managed. Vera's expression softened. "Because you freed Rodriguez. His case was connected to the same detective who framed you. When we started investigating the detective's other convictions, your name appeared. The same patterns of misconduct, the same fabricated evidence." August gripped Gideon's shoulder as he struggled to process. "So, by saving others, you saved yourself?" "Yes, in a way, yes," Vera confirmed. "Your selflessness led us straight to your own injustice." The next months were surreal. As Vera's team dismantled his conviction piece by piece, Gideon continued his legal work for other inmates. He couldn't stop, not when there were still people suffering the same corruption that had stolen his life. "Why are you still helping them?" another inmate asked. "You're getting out. Focus on yourself." "Because they still need help," Gideon replied simply. "My freedom doesn't erase their suffering. If anything, it makes me more responsible to fight for them." But privately, Gideon wrestled with devastating emotions. 8 years stolen, his 20s lost to a cage, relationships destroyed, opportunities vanished. The bitterness threatened to consume him until he remembered something August had told him. "You can't get those years back, but you can make sure they meant something." And they had.
5 men were freed because Gideon chose purpose over despair. 5 families reunited because he refused to let injustice stand, even while drowning in his own. When the judge finally vacated his conviction, Gideon stood in the courtroom, free but not quite whole. Vera approached him afterward with an unexpected offer. "We want to hire you. Your legal mind, your understanding of the system from the inside, we need that. You could help us free dozens more." Gideon stared at her. "I don't have a law degree. I barely finished high school before this nightmare started." "We have something better," Vera said firmly. "You have lived experience and self-taught expertise that surpasses many lawyers I know, and you have a heart that fights for others even when drowning yourself. That's invaluable." 2 years after his release, Gideon stood before a Senate committee investigating criminal justice reform. He spoke about the detective who'd framed him and 17 others, about the systemic failures that allowed it to happen, about the inmates still fighting for justice. "I spent 8 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit," Gideon testified, his voice steady despite the emotion. "Those years taught me 2 things: that our justice system is deeply broken, and that in the darkest places we can choose to be light for others." He paused, gathering himself. "I could have spent those years bitter, angry, focused only on my own suffering. Instead, I learned law to help fellow inmates. In doing so, I accidentally uncovered the corruption that freed me. That's not luck. That's what happens when we choose service over self-pity." After his testimony, August, released 2 years prior with Gideon's help, found him in the hallway. "You did good in there, brother. Your mama would be proud." Gideon's mother had died while he was imprisoned, another casualty of his wrongful conviction. "I hope so. I hope she knows these years weren't wasted, that they meant something."
"They meant everything," August replied. "You gave 5 men their lives back before you got yours. That's sacred, brother. That's the kind of thing that changes the universe." 5 years after his release, Gideon had helped free 23 wrongfully convicted individuals through the Innocence Alliance. He'd also started a program teaching current inmates legal research skills, not just to help themselves, but to help others. At a reunion of the men he'd freed, Rodriguez approached him with tears in his eyes. "You saved my life from behind bars. You had every reason to focus only on yourself, to be consumed by your own injustice, but you saw mine instead. Why?" Gideon was quiet for a long moment. "Because suffering either makes us smaller or bigger. It can turn us inward, make us selfish and bitter. Or it can crack us open, help us see other people's pain because we know how it feels. I chose the second path, not because I'm noble, but because it was the only way to survive with my humanity intact." He paused. "Those 8 years in prison, they were stolen from me. That's true, but I refuse to let them be meaningless. Every person we free, every life we restore, that's me taking back what was stolen and turning it into something that matters." Rodriguez embraced him. "You didn't just free my body, you freed my soul. You showed me that even in the darkest cages, we can choose who we become." Injustice doesn't just steal freedom, it tests whether we'll let bitterness steal our humanity too. A wrongfully imprisoned man could have drowned in rage. Instead, he taught himself law and freed others, accidentally uncovering the corruption that freed himself. True strength isn't avoiding suffering, it's choosing how we respond to it. Do we turn inward, consumed by our own pain? Or do we turn outward, using our suffering to recognize and ease others? Sometimes the key to our own freedom lies in fighting for someone else's. Sometimes the meaning we make from injustice matters more than the injustice itself. And sometimes the most powerful act of rebellion against a broken system is refusing to let it break our capacity for compassion. Choose light even in darkness. Fight for others even while drowning. Make your suffering mean something by ensuring others don't suffer alone. That's not just survival, that's transformation. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.